Some games like to make us chill. Others like to make us headbang from the get-go. But we've already talked about those, so let's tackle a third kind. Those that seem mild until they suddenly decide that you don't have enough iron in your diet and need to inject you with pure metal. So join us today as we talk about the tracks that made us go, wait, where did that guitar come from? Welcome to Music Arcade. Hello everyone, I'm Galen, the sound guy Firestone.
And I'm Eddie, and wait a second, someone's missing.
Yeah, unfortunately we have no Rana today. Ranakel's internet is, going through some things.
His internet is kaput.
Yep. So we cobbled together this episode, our first time just being the two of us.
Turns out we don't have that many things that in common in our gaming tastes, but we have a lot in common in our musical tastes.
Yeah, in fact, that's actually, I mentioned this, I think, in our last episode. That's how we met. I was in another Discord, and I was randomly jamming out to a song by a band called Delane. And I posted that song on that other Discord, and Eddie responded, and somehow he ended up on my Discord, and 3 years later, here we are.
As luck would have it, that is probably well, I'm not sure about the present because of COVID reasons, but they were my favorite symphonic metal band.
They were definitely one of my favorite live acts of all time. Sadly, they have broken up, essentially. Technically, they still exist insofar as the keyboardist Martine Westerholt is like the only member of the band still. But yeah, the things that made Delane are now gone, so that's unfortunate. That said, we're both metalheads, is the short version.
And for once, us going off topic to talk about bands is actually going to come up in the episode as being in topic.
Yeah, this is actually going to be relevant. I'm going to be making comparisons to other acts quite often because I can do that this time. This feels good. I like this.
The music arcade with a little bit less arcade than usual.
But no, there's still plenty of video games. We're not going off that beaten path too far. And with that, why don't you go ahead and lead us off? Because this first song was really cool.
Yeah, so we're starting the episode with some picks that are probably obvious to other people. But these are tracks, one from myself, and one from Galen, that, while not surprising to fans of those franchises, they might surprise you if you just come in with a general, I know what video games sounds like, and you try these franchises for the first time. And I'll just mention the name Guilty Gear, and that's probably enough for a lot of people in the audience to go, oh, I get it. Because there's a running gag among fans of Guilty Gear that each new installment in the franchise is an awesome metal album with a free game that comes with it. So, you know. But this one is from the game with the title that's a bit of a mouthful, which is Guilty Gear X2 Encore. I don't get it either. And the track is Holy Orders, Be Just or Be Dead. And as with everything Guilty Gear, the track title is probably a reference to the Iron Maiden song Be Quick or Be Dead. But
Probably.
The song has nothing to do with Iron Maiden.
No, it definitely doesn't sound like Maiden, but it does sound really good. This is my first time listening to this track. I think I've heard a remix of it before, but this is the first time listening to the real one. And yeah, it's definitely in that same like Gothic / Castlevania realm of it starts with the organ and then pumps up into the guitars. Like, it's definitely in that vicinity, but
you were saying it's in that Gothic vibe. I was just thinking it's almost like I Have a Type or something.
Yeah, right? Like that's not like you at all.
No, never listened to anything like that in my life.
No, never. Yeah, no, this song was like really legitimately cool. I was very, very happy with this one. I should probably check out more of this soundtrack. And I've been told I need to do that, but I should probably do that.
Yeah, shout outs to Daisuke Ishiwatari. He's a great guitar player. They recently released Guilty Gear Strive. That game has vocals in the soundtrack from what I can gather. I don't understand why. But I love Guilty Gear X2 soundtrack. It's amazing. And the song in particular is the theme to the character Kai Kiski, which For fans of power metal, you already know the two names it's referencing, Kai Hansen and Michael Kiske, because Guilty Gear. But yeah, it's great. I think the intro is a bit of a harpsichord actually, but it quickly goes into pure guitar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the
shredding.
symphonic element is still very much there. It reminds me, this is a bad comparison, but unfortunately it's the only thing my brain can think of. If Cradle of Filth wasn't as heavy and didn't suck as much, it's kind of in that same vibe.
I almost spilled my Gatorade when you said they as if they didn't suck as much.
Well, they're terrible.
But,
what do you want from me?
I mean, you're not wrong. I just didn't expect that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. I'd say.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think a bit more of some power metal bands in the intro, but later on it just completely goes off.
Yeah, the guitar groove is
heavier
definitely
styles.
more on the death and black side of the metal spectrum than it is power. But I totally get you with the intro. Like, going into it, you think you're going to get something a little lighter and brighter and shinier.
Yeah, it's almost like if Rhapsody was less cheesy and more hardcore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, Guilty Gear, it's a franchise that I really, really enjoy, though I'm really, really horrible at it.
Well, I actually have a question for you. So
Go on.
this is me being a complete and utter Guilty Gear, like, newbie. But I seem to recall one of the Guilty Gear games was actually not a fighting game, but was almost like a Dynasty Warriors clone? Do I have that right?
Yes, that was Guilty Gear 2 Overture, which is not the second Guilty Gear game in the franchise.
No,
Because-
obviously not. It's probably one of like 14 spin-offs of 2, because this was also a 2, right?
This is Guilty Gear X2.
X2.
Which I'm not sure which entry in the franchise. It's Arc System Works. Their naming schemes make no sense.
I mean, yeah, even someone who's cursorily familiar with BlazBlue knows that. Okay, so what we end up with is, Dynasty Warriors games kind of rock. We've talked about this before. So imagine me going into that not knowing it. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. Once upon a time at a Sam Goodies in Universal City Walk in Los Angeles, which should tell you how long ago this was, there was a demo kiosk of Dynasty Warriors 2. And I was so, wowed by this, I bought it that day. Now, here's the thing. If you're in a loud, CD store, there's music playing. I'm not hearing the demo kiosk other than a couple of sound effects that manage to get through. So I'm not really hearing the music itself. I get home, I put this thing in, and the first level is, for the Yellow Turban Rebellion, a song called Yellow Storm. And it is this, pulse-pounding rock track that wouldn't be out of place in a Mega Man game. And I'm like, wait, isn't this supposed to take place in the 3rd century? Why am I listening to rock music? It really kind of put me on the back foot.
Yeah, they don't teach us about those samurai with electric guitars. Don't nowadays. It's
Yeah.
a lost piece of history, sadly.
Also, Motochika Chosakabe was 1,500 years after this, and still in Samurai Warriors played a shamisen like it was an electric guitar for a glam metal band, diving around on stage. So that was actually an on-point reference, even though I'm sure you didn't know that at the time.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, this song still, it's not my favorite Dynasty Warriors song by any stretch, but it's still, a great intro. You get into it, and all of a sudden, it's oh. It's a pretty simple track. I think the loop is only, a minute and a half long, but it's varied enough that it really doesn't get repetitive.
And it really has enough energy to really put you in the mood for what Dynasty Warriors is like.
Yeah, if you got a Mook Murder, you better bring the Mook Murder with some guitars, because, But that kind of set the tone for the whole, like, genre almost. Like, I almost never hear of a game in the genre going this far afield of this kind of music. The closest we got, I think, would be, I mentioned this before, Fate Extella Link, and I found that soundtrack to be mostly kind of just there. Like, not even worth mentioning, despite being composed by people I really like.
I gotta say, as a fan of hack and slash ARPGs in the style of Grim Dawn and Path of Exile, the greatest shame I have is that I have yet to find any game in that genre that uses a soundtrack like this, because that genre has the same essential motto of #mooks must die as Dynasty Warriors. But it's always more ambient environmental stuff. It would be great if we have, if we had at least like an option in the menu for the alternative soundtrack, so that grinding at the end game is a bit more fun, at least.
Okay. I'm not a fan of that style, unfortunately, so I'm not really in a position to comment on that. I got burned out on Diablo 2 after about 30 minutes of hitting click to go here and hating it, so, like...
I can play Diablo 2 at all nowadays. My current love in the genre is Last Epoch, and we'll talk a bit more about it later.
Fair enough.
Foreshadowing.
So that leaves us with a... Yeah, it's rare to see a genre leader like this, but it really did. And honestly, the whole Dynasty Warriors 2 soundtrack, it is very good. For the Dynasty Warriors 2 10th anniversary, that was when Dynasty Warriors 7 had released, and they actually released every stage from Dynasty Warriors 2 and its entire soundtrack as DLC. So you basically got all of Dynasty Warriors 2 in Dynasty Warriors 7 with the new character roster and updated mechanics. They didn't change a single song. There was no point.
That sounds like a fan's wet dream.
Yeah. 10 years later, that soundtrack holds up just as well with no problems. It's a
good soundtrack. I haven't played the game, but what I've heard from the podcast, incidentally, it's always been because of you adding it to the podcast. Everything I've heard has been pretty fun.
Yeah, no, the soundtracks have pretty much always been a standout. There have been some weaker soundtracks. I mentioned 7. That one had a couple of good songs, but was, for the most part, kind of a weaker soundtrack. But then 8 turns around and has, like, one of the best soundtracks of the entire franchise. The music in the Warrior series has always been kind of one of its big selling points. Which is why when Samurai Warriors 5 happened and its soundtrack could best be described as okay, it felt like a big disappointment.
It can be described as it exists.
Yeah. And
it's officially a thing that exists in this world.
Yeah, it exists.
So yeah, those have been the tracks where if you're a fan of the franchise, you already know what's coming, but we didn't.
Yeah.
And now we're coming to something that's a new grounds for us, let's say, because we're doing licensed tracks.
Yeah.
And hashtag please don't DMCA me.
Well, I don't think they can for just talking about it unless you play the song in the episode.
I hope they don't find a way.
I don't think music would ever get popular if no one was allowed to talk about it. Anyway, so yeah, this is kind of a new ground for us. And to clarify, licensed music isn't something we usually cover. We tend to prefer original compositions for games, because licensed music already exists out in the world and just gets picked up to be played in a game. That said, it's still part of the game's soundtrack, and in this case, a really relevant one. So we decided, you know what, let's go ahead and do that this time around, because, yeah, it's rare that heavy metal bands, especially one of the bands that I'm going to be mentioning later, gets any sort of mainstream exposure to the general public. So I'm kind of shout that out and go like, you know what, this is pretty alright. With the caveat that no, none of these songs were originally composed for the game. Though later on, we will actually be talking about a death metal song that was composed for a game, but that's going to be later on in the episode. For now, let's go ahead and talk about some licensed tracks we ran across out in the wild for no reason. Eddie, take us away.
So, Lacuna Coil. I don't really enjoy this band, but here we are.
I like them live. I saw them opening for Epica once, and yeah, they were actually, like, really cool live. A little overly theatrical, but they put on a really good show.
To me, I don't really go to concerts very much, so it's a sad case of I found a gothic metal band that I, the goth, don't enjoy. But anyway, a little bit of backstory first. Because we're talking about The Sims right now, and The Sims has a story with their in-game radio stations. I believe the first game, everything was composed by the people at Maxis, and from The Sims 2 onwards, it was a mix of original stuff and licensed stuff.
Right.
And the licensed stuff is always re-recorded so that they're singing in Simlish, quote-unquote. So, The Sims 2 had a metal radio station, but it was all original stuff. And from my research, The Sims 4 has a metal station added in one of the expansions, apparently, where even bands like The Who are in there.
Oh.
To those not familiar, The Who is a Mongolian folk metal band, which does throat singing out and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the psychedelic rock band from olden times. But The Sims 3, which was the one I've played the most, did not have a metal radio station.
Okay.
They had the Supernatural expansion, which added a quote-unquote dark wave station. And this is a music podcast, so I might as well say we know dark wave is its own genre. I'm just quoting the name.
Yeah, I was about to say, like,
station.
you're like Darkwave Lacuna Coil. No, that is not an accurate genre descriptor. But I'm going to blame EA for that, not you, because I know you know better.
Yeah, it's the name of the radio.
Yep.
But yeah, it's basically a bunch of tracks that are gothic in nature in some way or another. So like some sort of dark stuff. So you have Garbage in there, which is sort of a dark grunge band. You have obviously Lacuna Coil, which is gothic metal. Part of the Supernatural expansion, which added vampires. But yeah, Lacuna Coil, a gothic metal band in a mainstream sim game, singing in Simlish. And it's actually one of the few tracks by them where I actually enjoy it a bit. And I did not expect that at all.
Okay. So now I'm starting to wonder if you just have something against Christina Scabbia's voice, because if they're actually in Simlish, and that's the one you like...
I enjoy the actual studio version of this song.
Okay.
Not just the Simlish one. It's just... I tend to be a bit bored by their output, to be honest, to the point where my favorite song of theirs is a cover of Enjoy the Silence.
Oh, yeah.
But this track, Kill the Light, I actually enjoy it. I think it's fun. It's not special for someone who listens to gothic metal all the time, but it's fun. It's cool.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm also not the biggest Lacuna Coil fan. As I said, they were really good live, but that was me trying to be complimentary. I've never quite gotten their music. Like, there's one, I think Karma Code was the one album of theirs I actually bought and have somewhere in my giant stack of CDs in my living room. And that was, like, decent, but even then, I'm not sure it would make my top 100 albums of all time. Like, it's just sort of okay. Like, I guess I have nothing against them, but they do have a couple of bangers, especially off of their early albums. Like, a couple of their singles are really good. And as you said, that Depeche Mode cover was really good. So they're not, like, bad or anything. Please don't think that I dislike them like I dislike Cradle of Filth.
I'd say they're inoffensive but fun.
Yeah, that's fair. And as I said, their live show was really good. And in fact, Christina Scabbia's presence on stage reminded me in no small part of Charlotte Wessel's stage presence from Delayed, the band we mentioned earlier. They have a very similar on-stage energy, despite their music being very different.
Let me just crawl under my desk and cry for Delane a little bit more.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
That was one unexpected metal band. There's another there that's even more unexpected, I'd say.
Yeah, this one really kind of threw me off. So, we all know Grand Theft Auto, and we all know that Grand Theft Auto has a bunch of competitors. And probably its primary competitor is the Saints Row series, which, while Grand Theft Auto has gotten progressively grittier and more realistic, and I say that with all appropriate air quotes, Saints Row went the other direction and got big and cartoonish and very comic booky in all the right ways. Like, it's actually, like, really fun. So, like, imagine my shock when I'm, like, running through this game and I'm checking the radio stations and a freaking Viking metal track comes on. Okay, maybe not exactly Viking metal, because I know the actual people who call themselves Viking metal are more related to black metal, whereas this band is really just straightforward melodic death metal with Viking lyrics. But even non-Viking metal fans pretty much know the name Amon Amarth.
And I think it's worth bringing up that Saints Row 2 kind of has more of a hip-hop culture aesthetic to it, like GTA San Andreas.
Yeah, it's definitely more street and urban than it is the kind of crew that would actually listen to heavy metal. Like, it's not like a biker crew or anything like that. I don't even think there were motorcycles in 2. I think those got introduced in 3. Am I wrong? I don't know. It's been so long. Did they ever release a 2 remastered? My brain is going in a million different tangents now that I'm thinking of Saints Row again. Damn it. Anyway.
I've only played 3 and 4. I have no idea.
2 remains my favorite in the series so far.
3 was fun. 4 bored me to hell after a while, but that's a whole nother kind of world.
That's a whole other that's not relevant for this production, I think. We were distracted enough. Let's just say that if you're dealing with a low-down gangsta crew, you're not expecting to hear Amon Amarth. But there they are with Runes to My Memory, which is this very dark song about dying in battle and going to Valhalla.
And it has full-on growled vocals, which you don't expect in a mainstream title.
No, you absolutely don't. Saints Row 2 sold millions of copies. Like, it's a huge game. And Amon Amarth is in there. Millions of people have heard Amon Amarth if they just clicked over to that station even once. I am floored by this. And I gotta give a shout out to the developers for including a band like that. Because, like, this was around the time that, like, the American metalcore scene was really big. So you got bands like Trivium in there, Shadows Fall, Amon Amarth. This, like, Scandinavian Viking metal band. It's awesome.
And the song is great, too.
The song is one of their better songs. I don't actually like Amon Amarth that much. I've got to be honest here. I had a brief period where I liked them, but once I realized that all of their albums were entirely interchangeable and exactly the same, I fell off on them hard.
I know that feeling. I have that feeling with a certain other artist that is not relevant to today's episode.
Yeah. So I really kind of am shocked at the level of exposure that Vigil, is that it? I don't know. The developers of Saints Row gave to this, like, comparatively extremely obscure metal band. Like, that's just cool. And frankly, in game, it actually works really well. Like, you wouldn't think it. Like, we were talking about that before. Like, this is a mostly, like, street aesthetic hip-hop culture. But if you're about to go on a rampage, Viking music works.
It does. You don't have longboats in Saints Row, but you do have cars that you can shoot off of.
Yeah, and a bunch of homies, too. Bring along a crew of... And that's their term for it, not mine. Like, to be clear. bring along a bunch of your gangsta buddies and just go killing other gangsters in with Viking metal blasting. Like, that's a vibe, man.
Yeah.
That's a feeling.
And I have to say that there's something hilarious in the fact that the game's cover art kind of looks like it's Tupac with his back to the camera,
Right?
holding 2 SMGs, and you're listening to Viking metal.
Yeah. You would not think this works, but it works really well. No, I don't know. This song, when I played it, happened right around the time I was into Amarth, so it was a nice kind of surprise. At that point, I'd listened to one of their albums. But, yeah, like, again, the main crux of this isn't that the song exists or even exists in a video game, it's that it exists on purpose in a video game like this. That the developers made this choice, and the world is a little better for it, I've got to be honest.
It's always nice to see more people being introduced to new sounds that they might not be familiar with.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even say that just as a metal fan who would enjoy more people listening to stuff that I like. I say that in general. I like learning about new artists. I just coincidentally, as an example, GTA 5 had a ton of indie artists in its rock and alternative stations, and I found a lot of bands that I quite enjoy nowadays. So I really like when people can give more exposure to sounds that are new or novel to people.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I was just so thrown off by this, and since then, like, I hate to say it, but since then, death metal has kind of become my go-to in games like this, and I can't do that anymore because I stream whenever I play games like this, and I can't do licensed music. I have to turn the music off. Or, like, do something where if it has, like, in GTA 4, this is one of the things I like, you could do a player radio station, grab a bunch of royalty-free stuff, like Master Boot Record is actually totally okay with using all of their tracks for just license-free, just play it as you like. And we'll be talking more about Master Boot Record a little later. But, yeah, it kind of kills me that my ideal musical take on this genre is not something I could do, because I would, if I were playing a game this size again, I would be streaming it, and if I'm streaming it, I can't have licensed music because ASCAP hasn't gotten a distribution license, and we've talked about this. Actually, did we talk about this before the episode? I don't remember if this was before or during anymore. Damn it. Either way,
think it was before the episode.
Music publishing is crap, and the DMCA is stifling to creators. Fix this. I will opt in to an ASCAP license to play licensed music. I will buy that license. It'll probably cost me a couple $100 a year. I'm actually okay with that. Let me have this freedom again. This is annoying. Anyway, hi. That was a semi-tangent, but I still think it's relevant to the game's audience, because this has specifically to do with game streaming.
Yeah, it is relevant. I was just quietly observing your beautifully crafted soapbox here, because I have nothing to add there.
Sorry, I'm a little more jacked into music publishing than most people, just occupational hazard. But, so I kind of know the ins and outs, and I don't know how ASCAP has not solved this problem yet. Like, this seems so easy. Just develop a license for content creators. That's it. That's all you have to do. Yeah, that's how restaurants do it. Like, you know how they play radio in restaurants? They have to pay for that privilege. And that's a music publishing license. Anyway, going to have a sip of coffee, and we're going to move on to the next topic before I blow my top.
And the next topic works really well because it's a comedy thrash metal band, kind of.
There's somewhere between thrash metal and New York hardcore. Like, somewhere between thrash metal and hardcore punk. They are very unique. They're almost in the like Primus zone of kind of unclassifiable, but you know when you hear them.
You're not wrong. I'm not a fan of Primus, but you're not wrong.
Well, neither am I, but it doesn't change the fact that they're incredibly unique and distinctive.
Yeah. At any rate, for those in the audience who have no access to our backend, let's say, we're talking about the band Green Jellÿ with unnecessary umlauts because it's cool, I guess.
Yeah, that was a metal thing in the 80s you saw a lot. Motley Crue is like the most obvious example of that. In fact, in Germany, they get mispronounced as Motley Crue a lot just because of those umlauts. But no, those are just a stylistic choice. And Green Jellÿ is a band I really only know for two things. One, their quote-unquote one-hit wonder, which it wasn't even a real hit. It was just big on like music video circles, which was like this almost spoken word metal version of the Three Little Pigs.
Oh god, I think I've heard that one before.
It
didn't cross over to Brazil, but I think I've heard that online.
Yeah, that was big in the music video circuit. Like that never got radio play or Billboard never charted it, but that one was a thing that exists. And then the other thing I know them from is this game that we're talking about. So take it away.
Yeah, so Galen was talking earlier about showing his age. It's time for me to show that even though I'm the youngest member of the podcast, I'm not that young either. Because picture me very young, like 7 years old young, I'm more or less, and I'm going to a Blockbuster to rent a game.
Oh god, I did that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's me showing my age now. So I rent this game. I loved the Spider-Man cartoon at the time. It was the 90s and early 2000s. I saw this game with the cover art showing essentially the cartoon designs for Spider-Man, Venom, and Carnage.
Right.
And I went, okay, this looks cool. I like Venom. Let's play this. And then I boot it up, and there's a thrash metal track as the title theme.
Right.
And as it turns out, Green Jellÿ did the entire soundtrack. So they might have been commissioned, they might have licensed some stuff. I am not sure. All I know is they did the entire thing. It's awesome. And I did not expect it at all when I first heard it.
Yeah, it's very different. Like, especially for a Super Nintendo game.
It's very, very clear on the guitar sounds for a Super Nintendo game. Like even Mega Man X, which is very guitar based, very guitar riff based, doesn't sound as much like distorted guitars as the soundtrack to this game does.
I actually disagree, because the first thing I heard when I heard this song today, when I listened to the playlist, was that this was a very, very similar synth pad to what they used in the X Hunter stages in Mega Man X2. So, maybe not Mega Man X1, but definitely in 2. They're very similar guitar riff pad.
That is fair. And since we're talking about it, I think it's worth pointing out that I actually enjoyed the 16-bit version more than the studio version for this track.
I actually agree with you quite a bit.
This being the title track, Carnage Rules.
Yeah.
And the actual 16-bit version has a pretty cool synth solo, and it doesn't have the edgy lyrics, because of course the lyrics to the studio version are edgy. It's about Carnage, the most edgelord of comic characters.
Yeah, well, maybe the most edgelord next to stuff that Todd McFarlane did, but yeah.
Yeah, someone I know has described Carnage as what if the Joker got the Venom symbiote, and they're not wrong.
No, that's pretty accurate.
But yeah, the soundtrack fits perfectly with the tone of the game and the characters we're dealing with Venom being a main playable character and Carnage being the main villain. And it's just very cool. It's pretty... it gets our heart pumping. Let me put it that way.
I honestly don't think the studio version would have worked as well if you're dealing with a side-scrolling beat-em-up like that. I think that if they had managed to somehow figure out how to get licensed music into a licensed recorded music into a Super Nintendo game 4 or 5 years before One Winged Angel happened, well, one, it would have been a technical marvel, but two, I just don't think it would have been as good. I really think the way the 16-bit mix works really plays well in the environment.
And the studio version does not have that cool synth solo at the end, which
No.
you might not listen to that synth solo very often because you're just going through menus really quickly, but it's cool. It's a very fun solo.
Yeah. This is honestly just really cool. Back in the 16-bit era, you did have the occasional like superstar, quote unquote. I know Green Jellÿ doesn't really qualify for that, but you had the occasional like actual mainstream star, music star come in and do something music related. Most famously, Sonic 3's soundtrack was partially composed by Michael Jackson's production team. Also, Right Said Fred, for some inexplicable reason, has something to do with Sonic. I'm not really sure how that happened. So you had this, like... This happened on occasion. This wasn't, like, completely out there. But for this, like, kind of obscure punk/thrash band like Green Jellÿ to come in and do the entire soundtrack to a game like this, I gotta be honest, and the way it turned out mixed in the game itself, this thing's kind of a... I was about to say kind of a marvel before I stopped myself and realized that would have been an accidental god-awful pun, and I would have hated myself for it.
And Rana isn't even here.
Rana isn't even here. Well, someone's got to channel Rana's bad pun energy. I guess it's me today, almost. I stopped myself before I could. I'm going to be honest here. This is one of the most impressive bits of game music prior to One Winged Angel. Like, this is up there with FF6's Opera. Like, it's just like, oh, how did you do that?
And shoutouts to the band realizing it because they released the 16-bit version of this track as a single.
Smart. Oh man, they were really ahead of the game on that one. Like, that was back in the day where you just could not buy soundtrack CDs. Square was like the only ones who were doing it, which carry through to today. Square's the only one doing weird music crap today too.
Emphasis on the weird.
Yes, we've talked about that before. We'll definitely talk about that later, but that's not really the point. The fact that I didn't know that Green Jellÿ released this as a single, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it was released at the time or later on, but I remember when I first got into Spotify a few years back, because I had a Windows phone and then Windows Phone just went up and died. Yeah. And I had to migrate all my stuff, and I migrated from Groove, which was Microsoft's streaming service, to Spotify. And the first thing I did was look up artists and songs that I knew. And at the time, currently they actually have the full album, which is titled just 333. They have the full album on Spotify, at least in Brazil. But at the time I first looked it up, they didn't have the album, but they had the 16-bit single.
That's amazing.
I don't know when it came out, but it's great.
Yeah. That's actually that puts a smile on my face. That's awesome. I actually have a whole new respect for Green Jellÿ for recognizing their work on that one and not just going, yeah, it was just some video game we did back when we were being punks. Then again, I don't even know if that was them. That could have just been their record label being ahead of the game, but somebody made the decision to do something real cool there. Man,
Whoever
that
was,
just feels like a
them.
thing. And with that, let's go from the 90s to, this week.
Nice segue.
That's about all I got, man. Okay, so we talk about this game a lot because this game is a really good soundtrack. Arknights. And right now we're at the tail end of their newest event, the 2-year anniversary / summer event in January, Dossel's Holiday. And this one almost kind of qualifies for our first category, that if you know the franchise and know the game, like, you'd be familiar with the music. But if you didn't, you'd be wondering why the heck this summer event is so metal. And actually, the summer events have been traditionally metal, which is weird. There's an in-story reason for this that I won't bother getting into. The fact that this time around, the metal band in question didn't actually show up in story, but the soundtrack has not actually changed from that, and that nothing can be really exemplified more than the boss theme, appropriately titled Captain, where you fight the boss of the event, who is, in fact, a boat captain.
I'm shocked.
Right. And this song is great. This one isn't as straight metal as the prior ones. The prior ones actually had guitars. This one's like a synth metal thing. It's more of like a hard style. It's in the same like realm as an artist that Eddie introduced me to called Master Boot Record, who is a synth metal artist who does everything in chiptunes, but it's still very clearly metal. Yeah,
it gets you headbanging no matter how many guitars it has or doesn't have.
Yeah. And that's really the case with this song, Captain, too. Like, it starts with kind of like the creepy intro, but then that synth guitar just riff comes in, and I'm just like, okay, things are happening and this is cool. The more I listened to this one, the more I liked it. This one really kind of like got me in there real hard.
Yeah, when you first sent the track, I was listening to it slowly, and I was checking the intro. I was like, okay, this is nice. I'm waiting for the metal bit, but this is nice. There we go.
Yep. Yeah,
there it is.
It's kind of a slow starter, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because in Arknights gameplay, it's not flat out go. It's a tower defense, so you have to actually set up. So the intro is kind of playing during the setup segment of the level, and then when things start getting interesting, that's when the guitar riff kicks in. So I
basically
kind
what you're saying is that if I, the guy who really sucks at every tower defense game in the world, were to play Arknights, it would start very, very chill as I'm building stuff up, and as soon as I'm panicking because my build order was horrible, we would get into the metal part.
Pretty much. And actually, build order is very important. Well, deployment order in this case, because it's technically a hero defense. It's still tower, but the characters are the towers. Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, the guitars would come in to taunt you at that point.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that. Like I'm bad even at Bloons GD6, man. I just that's me in tower defense games.
Yeah. Arknights has a history of this. Like we've talked about King Mouse in a prior level. That was the Rat King's boss theme. That was almost like jazz metal. We've talked about, I believe I talked about the Alive Until Sunset song that Christina V did vocals on, that I didn't like very much because while it was still clearly metal, it was 3 different genres of metal mashed together without any real cohesive tissue and it just didn't sound right. Alive Until Sunset being the in-universe metal band that keeps showing up in the summer events, and this was the first one they didn't, but their existence means that the summer events have metal in it every time.
I cannot complain about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of these things. For some reason, if you in your summer events, you're headbanging. That's just a creative decision they've made and have stuck with, and even now in this more synth metal hardstyle kind of thing, they're doing that, and I think that's cool. I think that it's really neat and interesting, and it makes me happy. And I've talked about just how varied Arknights music is. Like, you go from a track to this, to a full-on techno, to a sweeping symphonic score by Go Shiina, who did the God Eater games and Code Vein, like, to a flat-out EDM track by Vegas resident Steve Aoki, just on and on and on and on and on. The fact that the music team is so willing to be like, oh, in fact, you know what? This is actually relevant. Fairly recently, the development team, Hypergrift, opened their own record label, Monster Siren Records, named after a character in Arknights record label. to release
Ooh.
their promotional singles for this game. Like, you want to talk about a soundtrack that has a game attached to it. Hypergriff is really kind of living that life with Arknights. Like, they're actually doing it, which is hilarious to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we reach a point where the game is the promotional material for the album, since contrary to Guilty Gear, Arknights, as far as I know, is free to play.
It is. It's a very friendly gacha, but it's still a gacha game. It's still like you pay for rolls. You don't. Like, I almost never pay for rolls, but you can, and some do.
Yeah, because like in Guilty Gear, it's just a joke, right? Because you'd have to pay for the game, but it's this joke that the game is a free thing that comes with the great metal album. This might actually do the journey into becoming promotional material for albums in the future.
Yes. Yeah, Arknights could definitely go that way. And considering the strength of the music and the strength of not even the license, like they've hired who was it? Casey Lee Williams, one of the guys who does the Ruby soundtrack. They did a track. Did I have that name right? I don't know. I'm not looking at the liner notes right now, unfortunately. Still kind of kills me that this game doesn't have a jukebox function. It's like the one thing it's missing.
At least we found out a couple months ago that it is on Spotify. So
yes,
kudos.
So yeah, they are really pushing the music, and yeah, this event that's still going on as we speak. Spoiler: I actually just autoed a level while we're doing this.
Something tells me you really like the game.
I do. Well, I've been playing it for over 2 years now, and it's still fun. So I like the fact that they keep doing new things, and I like the fact that it is so varied, both in gameplay and, yes, in music. It gives me something to listen to, and again, I love how good the music curation is.
And you don't usually get stuff to listen to when you're playing a mobile game.
Yeah. In fact, a couple of interesting things happened. I was listening to one track from this game, and I forget which one, on my actual speakers. Like, I think I was listening on YouTube or whatever, and I'm like, oh, there's so much more here than my pathetic little mobile speakers can show off. So
yeah, usually mobile games just go for, like, generic, epic sounding stuff.
Yeah.
And that's it. But Arknights goes the extra mile.
Really does. So, yeah. Captain, a really good boss theme for a really shockingly good music game that happens to have a tower defense gacha involved in there somewhere.
That's gonna be the new joke.
Is it wrong?
No, it isn't.
All right, let's talk about another spot where we don't think metal is supposed to be, RPGs.
Not just RPGs, but a Mario RPG.
Yeah, this song really threw me off.
Yeah, I was the one who shared this months ago for the first time. I never played the Paper Mario games because I haven't had a Nintendo console since the Super Nintendo.
Right.
But I was watching a YouTube channel. I think it was Barely Sociable, who does like internet mysteries and stuff.
Okay.
And they had this track as the outro to one of their videos, and I went, okay, that sounds nice. Let me check the credits. Let me see where it's from. Like, I was thinking, well, probably some sort of indie musician like Miyu or maybe Kevin MacLeod, but a particularly good song from them. And then I clicked the link and went like, Paper Mario, what the hell?
Right?
It sounds like it belongs in a Castlevania game, like you're walking the steps towards Dracula's seat of power, and that's where you'd be listening to this. But it's in a Paper Mario game.
Yeah, that is really out there for a track like this. Mario's had a fairly diverse soundtrack, especially Mario Odyssey, but nothing like this. This This is new and out there. This is probably the most unique piece of Mario music since Super Mario RPG, composed by, hey, guess who? Perennial love letter from this show, Yoko Shimomura. With one song exception, and that was composed by Uematsu because it was a straight rip from Final Fantasy IV. But, yeah, this is definitely one of the most unique, because it sounds like it's out of the Michiru Yamane playbook. Like, you're right, this sounds like a Castlevania track. Like, what the hell is this doing in Mario? Any Mario.
Yeah, from what I could gather, it seems like it's the theme to the final boss in the Origami King.
Okay.
The track is titled Origami Castle, so, fits you're in his castle fighting him. But
it's either the final boss or the final dungeon with a title like that. It feels more like a dungeon track to me, personally, but what do I know? I've never played it.
Yeah, I might be wrong as well, because I also haven't played it, but yeah, either way, it's like, first, you don't expect this much energy in a turn-based RPG. Secondly, you don't usually see this much energy in a JRPG. And thirdly, the hell is this doing in a Mario game?
Right? This one, like, really threw me off, but it's also really good. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining about any of this. It was just...
Yeah, no, it's really, really fun. Really nice find.
Yeah. Do we know who the composer on this track was?
I don't have a name at hand. We'll try to find it for the publication of the episode. It will be on the description of the episode. As usual.
Okay.
It's a nice... It was a nice find. Like, I can't say I would have gone looking for the soundtrack to a Mario game on my free time if I hadn't found this by accident as the outro to a random YouTube video I was watching.
Every once in a while, you get those stop and go, what is this moments with music where you just got to track it down. That's happened to me a couple of times.
And it's nice when you actually get to find it. And
yeah.
Especially when you realize after you found it that you can talk about it on the podcast. Yay!
Hey, it's good for something.
Go us!
Pause, Rana. I don't know if you're still there. Thank you for stopping by. I don't know either of those, and sorry you're still going through this internet thing. I hope you get it fixed, buddy. Unpause. Yeah, every once in a while you get those special gems, but you want to talk about not expecting this energy in an RPG. Let's talk about Final Fantasy X and the most inappropriate final boss song in the history of the Final Fantasy series. I say inappropriate because most of Final Fantasy X soundtrack is a fairly serviceable, bordering on really good Final Fantasy soundtrack. I didn't really think much of the regular battle theme, whatever. It was a collaboration between Uematsu and future FF13 and FF7 remake co-composer Masashi Hamauzu. Generally speaking, this is a very good, kind of different, but extremely solid Final Fantasy soundtrack. And then you get to the final boss, Braska's final Aeon, and it plays a death metal track.
I would dare the incurring the wrath of the Amon Amarth fans by saying that I think this track is more metal than Amon Amarth.
Even I'm looking at you funny for that one.
Because this is heavy. Like,
it is very heavy.
It also has growls like that Amon Amarth track. It has some very heavy riffs. It's not joking around.
Yeah, this is a straight up like Florida death metal. This is like right out of the Death playbook, the band Death. Okay, so two funny things about this. First, a lot of fans, and this baffles me, it will baffle you too, I'm sure. A lot of fans seem to think this sounds like Rammstein.
I mean, I just...
No. This sounds nothing like Rammstein at all. Where do people get this idea? I don't get it.
I guess they've only heard Mind Tile and they don't understand German, so
This
they
doesn't even
instantly
sound like
assume
Mind Tile.
it doesn't. It doesn't. That's just the best I can come up with. It's like the best idea I have in my mind is that maybe they've heard Mind Tile, which is probably the heaviest song by, well, one of the heaviest songs by Rammstein. Another would be Buchstabe, and they don't understand German, so they instantly assume that Till Lindemann's just growling all the time. But even then, like, there's levels to reach that. Like, they might have pulled a muscle.
Yeah. The other funny thing about this song, and hey, we're going to talk about the intricacies of music publishing again for a moment. While this song was actually fully composed by Nobuo Uematsu himself, it's actually never seen iterations in other Final Fantasy games because it was performed by another band. Which is kind of rare, because other, like, outside performance songs, like Eyes on Me from FF8, did get reprises in other projects, but this one, for some reason, has been kind of on that, like, bubble zone of not being able to reproduce it for some reason. So I'm not sure what happened there. But yeah, no, this is entirely an Uematsu track. Like, in terms of writing. Like, this is Nobuo Uematsu right here. To the shock of anyone who's listened to this podcast at all for approximately ever. And Rana has come into the chat saying, sorry, I think you mean the most inappropriate opening song in a Final Fantasy series. Yes, a snippet of this song does appear as part of the opener of Final Fantasy X. It does not hit nearly as hard at that point, especially since, one, that's an instrumental version, and two, it's almost drowned out by sound effects during that sequence, because that's a borderline apocalyptic event. Whereas during the final boss, it's really present and in your face. It really hits you like a ton of bricks at that point. Like, I was very shocked the first time I heard this. Like, what is this doing in this game?
I gotta say, I don't play Final Fantasy very much, if at all, but I am familiar with Uematsu's work, and if this was entirely his composition and no one else's, really as credited, I think he might have been having a bad day when he composed this.
Right?
This is angry.
This is very angry. And the final boss really wasn't. What's funny is the first boss of the final dungeon, which was right before this, was kind of a perfect storm of the best part of what Uematsu does. And that was Battle with Seymour, which has showed up in just about every Final Fantasy concert I've ever heard. And then the one after this, the next two after this, which were not really final boss tracks because they were part of what I would call the interactive ending, I guess. The real final boss is this fight, and thus this song. And it's wild, dude. I was blown away by this one. You want to talk unexpected metal? Where did this come from? Why is this a thing? How did they come up with this idea? Why are we all of a sudden in death metal land? I am so confused.
I gotta say, I wanna track this track down on Spotify, because this would fit right in with my playlist that I lovingly call "In Case of Emergency Quickly" playlist, which is for those days where work is being a bit of a pain, let's say, because this would fit right in.
It would, wouldn't it? This is definitely bad day music. What's funny is the final boss, like, the story behind it isn't even as angry. Like, this, like, you call this an angry song, it almost doesn't even fit in context.
Now you're making me imagine a scene where this track plays as you fight Toad from the Mario series.
Nothing quite that fluffy, no.
Would be hilarious, though.
It would be.
But yeah, shall we continue our trend of JRPGs with one final pick then?
Let's do it.
It's Pokemon time.
Another series that you're like, metal in this?
Yeah, and I'm surprised because I don't think we've ever brought up Pokemon before, even though it is known for having a decent soundtrack, decent to very good soundtrack, depending on the entry.
Yeah, no, I've never really had a problem with Pokemon's music, and its original battle theme is pretty iconic.
Yeah, the soundtrack's generally pretty fun. At most, I would say the first couple games might have been a bit of an issue because of the chiptune nature of the original Game Boy.
Yeah.
Which limited the sounds a lot, but...
Well, I mean, it's a 4 to 8-bit system, so that doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah, it's not bad. But then we get to the Nintendo DS with Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. And we have the Neoplasma Battle... Neo Team Plasma... Neo Team Plasma Battle music. That's a mouthful. And I should note that this isn't the track to a battle with a boss or a mini boss. This is the track that plays when you're fighting grunts.
Yeah. It
kind of falls into that Arknights camp, I'd say, where it doesn't have guitars, and I wouldn't say it tries to mimic guitars necessarily, but it goes hard.
Yeah, the vibe is there.
This is metal. Yeah.
I don't think this is an inappropriate choice for this episode at all. I feel like last episode I actually had an objection to one of your choices. One of yours and one of both of you, because I see random in my Twitch chat, sorry. I don't remember which one off the top of my head. But this one, no, I don't have a disagreement with. This is clearly, like, I understand why people would call this, like, at least metal adjacent. So first things first, I love the mixing on this. This makes really good use of panning. Like, there's some sweeps between the left and right speakers and some of the harmony and some of the percussion that really play.
That intro is really fun to listen to. My favorite part is the main riff, but the intro is really, really cool as well.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in the song that's actually really cool. And I guess my other comment is I would consider Pokemon's primary competitor to actually be Shin Megami Tensei, because the collect them all, go beat the final boss thing is still very much present in both, though the systems are immensely different. SMT has a pretty long history of rock and metal, and Pokemon doesn't, and I almost feel like this song would not be out of place in an SMT game.
I cannot comment on that because I haven't played an SMT game yet. I have played Digimon before, and I'd say this would be very out of place on Digimon. It does have the electronic sound that is sort of the key to the soundtrack on Digimon games, but it goes way harder.
Yeah.
And it's worth pointing out, this is kind of a remix of the original Team Plasma battle theme from Black and White, the original releases. But personally, I prefer this one. I like the synths on this one a little bit better. But both of those, they go hard.
Having only heard this song, it's a good song.
Yeah, for a grunt battle theme, you wouldn't expect them to go this hard.
Right? No, I'm actually very, like, I keep getting surprised in the weirdest ways by Pokemon. Like, I still can't get into an actual Pokemon game to save my life. Like, I for the life of me have no desire to go back to Sword and Shield at all. Like, I got 3 badges in, and I'm just like, all right, well, I know the gameplay loop, and I hate it, so I think hate it's a little strong, but I am not there on it. But I thought the game was really adorable, and the maps were kind of cool, and it definitely did a lot of things right that I feel like maybe if the story was more focused and the gameplay wasn't literally catch them all, which is just tedious for someone who's been playing with Fusion for 20 years. 20 is a little strong. 15 years?
You're showing your age too much now.
I am, but whatever. I'm old. I'm almost 40. I'm almost 40!
Yeah. The worst part is that
39 this year. What is wrong with my life? Anyway, hi.
Oh boy. The worst or strangest part is that I've actually grown up with Pokemon. Like, I remember being a kid and being envious of people with their Game Boy Advances playing Pokemon Ruby. But nowadays I prefer the the gameplay loop in Digimon Stories Cyber Sleuth.
Okay.
Because that game, the farming and the capturing aspect, those are much more streamlined. I would say it's much more interesting to me, and you discover the evolutions as you go, etc. But the soundtrack there is so generic, and if it only had like half the energy of this battle theme.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The battle theme will make or break a game soundtrack for me because it's the thing you're likely to be hearing the most. This is one of the reasons why Chrono Cross does not actually get a pass from me, because while the soundtrack, when you're listening to it, is great, the song you hear the most in that game is god-awful terrible. So I'm like, I think about the Chrono Cross soundtrack, I think about that battle theme, and it just makes me, like, pout. So I get what you mean with the Digimon thing. Oh god, Rana with the it's simple. We have Galen as the SMT guy, Eddie is the Digimon guy, and him is the Pokemon guy.
I guess we can note that down for a future episode idea.
Oh, that's happening. That is absolutely happening. I almost want to say we should each force someone to play one of the others.
Gotta catch them all, the soundtracks. Actually, parenthesis, the soundtracks.
Oh, man.
We even have an episode title now.
Okay, so, spoiler. Eddie, I was planning on surprising you since it's on sale by buying you SMT Doctorate HD on Steam, but now I'm absolutely going to do that.
Oh, man. Thank you. I wish I could buy something in return, but
don't worry about it. I know things are a mess right now.
No, it's not just that. It's the Steam doesn't allow me because Brazil has lower prices, and to avoid people just paying their friends to buy cheaper, they don't allow me to trade to the US.
That makes sense. Anyway, we're totally off topic now, but yeah, that's definitely added to the list. Oh, where were we? I got thrown off so hard by Rana's comment that now I'm just like, all right. Oh, hang on, is that?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to the commentary on the track.
Yep. All right. And I think that's all for the main body of our episode, so let's go on to Music Arcade Now Playing. So I got nothing. I've barely been playing video games this week, and the ones I have been playing are the same ones, and the one song I was going to use was the song I actually used in this episode, so I actually have nothing. Arknights was it. That was what I was going to add to my Now Playing list, so Eddie, take it away.
Yeah, I just want to point out that it's kind of funny that last year, I think it was around November, I brought up the idea of making this segment, and we all went, okay, but maybe we run out of ideas. No, our podcast is bi-weekly. I think with 2 weeks of time, we'll be able to think of... both of us have barely played anything, and Rana isn't online, so this is a bit bare bones this time. I've been playing 2 games. I've been playing Last Epoch, which I've mentioned in the past in another episode, as having been playing at the time. I took some time off, and now I'm back, and I'm trying out the endgame systems. It's pretty fun. The soundtrack still is a bit generic, and I still am miffed that the best track in the soundtrack isn't available on their YouTube page.
No!
But the game is fun. I'm really enjoying it. I'm excited for updates. I hope they balance more classes out, because currently, out of the 5 classes, each of them with 3 masteries, about half of them aren't fully fledged yet. It is in beta after all. It's in early access. So fingers crossed. We are on, I think, patch 0.8.4. The next patch won't be adding new classes, but the one afterwards will be balancing some stuff, adding new skills. So fingers crossed we get some cool Rogue builds this year, because Rogue is a one-trick pony right now, even though I love the skills that the Rogue has in this game. The other game I've been playing kind of surprised me with its soundtrack, and it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I'm not usually a CCG guy. I get very annoyed at the pay-to-win aspect that CCGs often have, because you have to, pay real money to get decent cards to actually win games. Master Duel, I think on the long run it will have those issues as well, but on the short term it gave enough free cards and free gems to buy packs on release that as long as you had a wiki open in your browser to double check the synergies, you could make a half decent deck without much issue on day one. And I have a half decent Dark Magician deck. But the soundtrack, I didn't expect a CCG to have such a cool soundtrack. There are, I think I've heard about 4 different battle themes, maybe 5, or dual themes, since we're talking Yu-Gi-Oh! And everything is a duel. But there's one that I fell in love in particular. I don't think it has a name. The soundtrack doesn't seem to have been released. But it's one. It's heavily inspired by ancient Egypt. So, harkening back to the first series, the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. And as the guy who loves ancient Egypt and who is in his free time writing a story inspired by ancient Egypt, I think it's no surprise that I love that song.
Yeah.
But the other tracks are also pretty fun. There's one that's very dramatic with a choir in it. So the general vibe you get varies a lot from duel to duel. But it's a very fun soundtrack. I really enjoyed it. It caught me off guard. First of all, because it's a CCG, and secondly, because it's Konami in 2022. You don't expect many great things from Konami in 2022.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no.
But it was fun. It was really fun. I haven't been playing as much as of the last few days, but that's because I've gotten a new client, a new freelance gig, so I've been pretty busy, and often I just go for catharsis and play Last Epoch and just murder hundreds of mooks rather than thinking strategies on a card game.
At some point, I really do need to get you into Dynasty Warriors. It seems like you would be right at home.
I might. Catharsis is one hell of a drug.
It really is. And with that, that's it for today, folks. We'll be back soon with a new episode, hopefully with 100% more Frenchmen. And in the meantime, you can reach us over on music.arcade.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see y'all next episode. Later.
See you next time.